The low, persistent hum of the server room was the only sound I could hear over the blood pounding in my ears. It was a symphony of my own creation, a chorus of meticulously maintained machines that formed the digital spine of one of the most powerful trading firms in the city. I was standing in the nerve center, the heart of it all, a place no one else was even authorized to enter. My fingers danced across a terminal, the green text scrolling in familiar patterns, as I ran a final diagnostic on the network I had built from the ground up. This was my domain, my kingdom, a kingdom I was about to dismantle, piece by piece. It had been exactly 1 year since my family had forgotten my graduation, a day that was supposed to be a celebration of my hard work, a culmination of years of sacrifice. Instead, it was the day I realized I was utterly alone. The day I decided to build my own legacy, under a new name, far away from the people who were supposed to love me most. The man who had set this all in motion, the catalyst for my quiet, methodical revenge, was named Julian Croft. He was the son of the firm's CEO, a man who had inherited his position not through merit, but through bloodline. He was a caricature of entitlement, a walking personification of unearned confidence. He had a habit of snapping his fingers to get someone's attention, a gesture so condescending it made my teeth ache. That morning, he had swaggered onto the trading floor, a space I rarely visited but was currently overseeing for a major system-wide upgrade. He found me perched on a stool, my laptop open, monitoring the real-time data flow of a new fiber optic line I had just installed. The entire floor was a buzz of activity, traders shouting, phones ringing, the air thick with the smell of money and stress. Julian, however, seemed to exist in a bubble of his own self-importance. He strolled over to me, a smirk playing on his lips, and snapped his fingers right in my face. "You," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "I need you to get me a coffee. And make it quick. I have a meeting in 5. I slowly looked up from my screen, my gaze meeting his. I didn't say a word. I simply held his gaze, my expression unreadable. This was not the first time he had mistaken me for an intern or some low-level assistant. My work was largely behind the scenes. My presence on the floor a rare anomaly. I was the architect of their digital world, the one who kept their millions, their billions, flowing seamlessly through the ether. But to Julian, I was just another face in the crowd, another cog in the machine he thought he owned. "Did you hear me?" he said, his voice rising in irritation. "Coffee. Now." I closed my laptop, the soft click echoing in the sudden silence that had fallen over the trading floor. Everyone had stopped what they were doing. All eyes were on us. They knew who I was. They knew the power I wielded. Julian, in his blissful ignorance, was about to make a very, very big mistake. He pointed a finger at me, his face turning red. "You know what? Don't bother with the coffee. You're fired. Get your things and get out. I don't have time for insubordination." A collective gasp went through the room. My firing was not a quiet affair. It was a public execution, a display of dominance from a man who had no idea who he was dealing with. I was not an employee. I was an independent contractor. I owned the entire IT infrastructure, the servers, the network, the very fiber optic cables that connected them to the world. They were my clients, and Julian had just terminated our contract in the most spectacular way imaginable. I stood up, my movements calm and deliberate. I looked at Julian, a flicker of a smile on my lips. "As you wish," I said, my voice barely a whisper, and just like that, I turned and walked away, leaving behind the unsigned contract renewal that would have guaranteed their continued access to the digital kingdom I had built. Before we get into the beautiful, beautiful chaos that followed, do me a solid and hit that subscribe button. Drop a like on this video if you want to see what happens when a silver spoon-fed executive realizes he just sawed off the branch he was sitting on. Trust me, you don't want to miss this. My exit was a study in practiced nonchalance. I didn't slam doors. I didn't raise my voice. I simply gathered my personal laptop, slipped it into my bag, and walked towards the elevators. Julian, puffed up with his perceived victory, watched me go with a triumphant smirk. He thought he had won. He thought he had put me in my place. He had no idea that he had just handed me the keys to his company's destruction. As I stepped into the elevator, I saw the frantic face of the floor manager, a man named David, who understood the gravity of what had just happened. He was already on his phone, likely trying to get in touch with someone, anyone, who could fix this. But it was too late. The dominoes were already falling. My lair, as my few trusted associates called it, wasn't some dark, basement server room. It was a sleek, minimalist office on the top floor of a different, more discreet building downtown. This was my control center, the physical nexus of my digital empire. The walls were lined with monitors displaying real-time data streams, network schematics, and security feeds. This was where the real power resided, far from the shouting and chaos of the trading floor. I sat down at my central console, the leather of my chair sighing in welcome. I took a deep breath, savoring the quiet. The revenge I was about to enact wasn't born of a hot-headed desire for destruction. It was a cold, calculated business decision. Julian had terminated our service agreement. I was simply following his directive. I was rolling back uncontracted amenities. The first step was subtle, almost imperceptible. I accessed the building's integrated access control system, a network I had designed myself. With a few keystrokes, I downgraded the access credentials for every employee of Croft & Son Trading. Their premium-tier RFID cards, which granted them access to the executive elevators, the private gym, and even the priority queue at the lobby coffee bar, were now reverted to the standard, basic level. The 6 express elevators that whisked executives to the upper floors would no longer recognize their cards. They would now have to wait in line with everyone else for the local elevators, which stopped at every single floor. A minor inconvenience, to be sure, but a clear and immediate message that their privileged world was beginning to shrink. Next, I turned my attention to the freight elevators. Croft & Son had a standing contract for exclusive use of 2 of the building's largest freight elevators during peak trading hours, a necessity for moving sensitive hardware and confidential documents. I pulled up the scheduling software, another one of my creations, and with a single click, revoked their priority access. The reservation was now open to all tenants in the building. I knew for a fact that a major marketing firm on the 24th floor was in the middle of a massive rebranding campaign and had been struggling to book freight elevator time for their new office furniture. I sent a quick, anonymous tip to their office manager. Within minutes, the slots previously held by Croft & Son were booked solid for the next 2 weeks. Now, for the main event. The big one. The lifeblood of any modern trading firm is its network bandwidth. Speed is everything. A millisecond of lag can mean the difference between a multi-million-dollar profit and a catastrophic loss. Croft & Son paid a premium for a dedicated, high-priority fiber optic line, a virtual private highway that I had personally engineered and managed. It was their golden ticket to the market, their edge over the competition, and Julian had just handed it back to me. I opened the network allocation interface. A beautiful, complex web of digital pathways spread across my main monitor. I located the dedicated pipeline allocated to Croft & Son. It was currently humming along at a blistering 100 gigabits per second. With a calm, steady hand, I began to throttle it back. Not all at once, that would be too obvious. I started by shaving off 10%, then another 10%. I rerouted their traffic through a series of public nodes, introducing microscopic, almost untraceable, amounts of latency. To them, it would feel like the internet was suddenly having a bad day. Trades would take a fraction of a second longer to execute. Data feeds would stutter. The finely tuned machine of their trading floor would start to seize up. The first reports of the fallout came from David, the floor manager. He called me in a panic, his voice strained. "What's going on?" "The network is crawling. We're losing trades. The guys on the floor are in an uproar." "I'm not sure, David," I replied, my voice a model of calm concern. "Our service agreement was terminated this morning. I no longer have access to your systems." "Terminated? What are you talking about?" "Julian fired you." "He didn't." He stopped, the realization dawning on him. The silence on the other end of the line was more eloquent than any words. The chaos escalated quickly. Julian, in his infinite wisdom, tried to fix the problem himself. He was seen barking orders at the building's general IT staff, a team that had no jurisdiction over the bespoke network I had built. They could only shrug and point to the blinking red lights on the server racks, lights that indicated a network failure they had no way of diagnosing. He even tried to call our old internet service provider, only to be told that their contract was with my company, not his. He was locked out, a king without a kingdom. Then came my masterstroke, the move that would transform this from a simple act of revenge into a brilliant business coup. Croft & Son's biggest competitor was a hungry, aggressive firm named Apex Global. They operated out of the same building, and I knew they had been trying for years to get the kind of network priority that Croft & Son enjoyed. I pulled up their contact information and placed a call to their chief technology officer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Evelyn Reed. "Evelyn," I said, getting straight to the point. "A unique opportunity has just presented itself. I have a dedicated 100 gigabit fiber line that has just become available. It comes with priority access to the building's freight elevators and top-tier credentials for your executive team. Interested?" The line was silent for a moment. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head. "How soon can you have it up and running?" she asked, her voice laced with a mixture of suspicion and excitement. "I can have you fully migrated by the end of the day," I replied. The deal was done in less than an hour. The contract was signed, the payment was processed, and I began the process of redirecting the digital lifeblood of Croft & Son to their biggest rival. While Julian was still trying to figure out why the elevators wouldn't recognize his keycard, Apex Global was already enjoying the fastest, most reliable network connection in the building. The very tools Julian had taken for granted were now being used to systematically dismantle his company's market share. The final confrontation came a week later. I was summoned to a meeting in the main boardroom of Croft & Son. Julian was there, of course, looking pale and defeated. But he wasn't the main attraction. Sitting at the head of the table was his father, the CEO, a man with a fearsome reputation and a gaze that could wither steel. Their lawyers were there, a phalanx of suits looking grim and uncomfortable, and on my side of the table there was just me. The CEO, a man I'll call Mr. Croft Sar, got straight to the point. "What have you done?" he asked, his voice a low growl. I calmly explained the situation. I laid out the facts, without emotion, without accusation. His son had terminated our service agreement. I had complied with that termination. I had then entered into a new, and very lucrative, agreement with another client. Julian, finally finding his voice, sputtered, "He sabotaged us! He's holding our data hostage!" I turned to him, my expression one of mild amusement. "Julian, I haven't touched your data. It's all still there on your servers. You just don't have a network that can access it efficiently. And as for sabotage, I believe the term you used was fired. I was simply following your directive." The lawyers started talking about breach of contract, about legal action. I let them talk. When they were done, I placed a single document on the table. It was my copy of the service agreement, the one Julian had refused to renew. I pointed to the termination clause, a clause that I had personally written. It clearly stated that upon termination of the contract, all services would be immediately suspended, and all dedicated infrastructure would revert to my ownership, to be disposed of as I saw fit. "Mr. Croft, sir, read the clause," his face growing paler with every word. He looked at his son, a look of pure, unadulterated fury in his eyes. The game was over. They had lost. The fallout was swift and brutal. Croft & Son was forced to relocate their entire trading operation to a new building, a process that took months and cost them millions in lost revenue and logistical nightmares. Julian was re-signed to a backwater office in a remote, undesirable location, a corporate Siberia from which he would likely never return. Apex Global, now thriving with their newfound technological advantage, quickly became the dominant player in the market. The epilogue to this story came a few months later. I was in my office, monitoring the seamless flow of data to Apex Global, when Evelyn Reed, their CTO, stopped by. She didn't say much. She just stood there for a moment, watching the screens, a look of respect in her eyes. "You know," she said, finally breaking the silence, "we've been trying to get an edge like this for years. You built something truly remarkable here." I simply nodded, a small smile on my face. "I just provide the tools," I said. "It's up to you to use them." She smiled back. "Well, we're very grateful you chose to share them with us." As she left, I leaned back in my chair, the quiet hum of the servers a soothing balm. My family had forgotten me, but I had built a new life, a new identity, a new legacy. I had learned a valuable lesson that day, a lesson that had become the cornerstone of my success. Quiet moves beat loud egos. And in the world of high-stakes business, you should always know where the power really comes from. Thanks for listening. See you next time.